How high do you want this to be? Can you hear me back there?
Yep.
How did Don Flaherty get involved with the World War II night fighters? Well, Pearl Harbor hit, and I was a student at the University of California. There were 80 men in a boarding house. That was on a Sunday. And Monday morning, there were 40 telegrams outside ordering men to active duty. And I happened to be one of them. Because I had been smart, I thought, of going into the National Guards prior to going to, well, I was ending junior college and heading to Berkeley. And I thought that it'd be smart to be a National Guard. Mine was one of those 40 telegrams. So I had to report to the Presidio of San Francisco. I got that 2 weeks later. I was there, and I found out next I was in Bakersfield, California, to replace the depot. So they said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm waiting to go to war, I guess." Sure enough, they started recruiting us and having us do this and do that. And they came to me and said, "Well, do you think you can be a pilot?" And I said, "I'd like to be a pilot." They sent me to, I was selected to go down into Southern California to the flying school. And I was going along great till once they allowed me, they were trying to give me my final check out as a pilot and as a steerman. And I brought it in off the California coast and put it in an irrigation ditch. About a week later, I was coming out of it. You people know what an irrigation ditch is, you know what Southern California. They were coming out of it. I was in the hospital in Santa Barbara, California. And they were saying, I kept saying I said something wrong. I've been bothered with something, my head injuries. Well, they knew I'd been an amateur boxer. That's how I went to Berkeley on a scholarship. But they said, "Let's go check him out." They took me into his room, and they gave, as you gentlemen all who have been in flying and even non-flying, they gave me a couple of sticks to bring together for depth perception, and mine ended up about that far apart. The next day I was rolled in for a flying evaluation board, told me my career in the Air Force was over as a possible air crew. I had to go to Jefferson Barracks, Missouri. So I went, here I was with my little pink and the green jacket, my pink zone, went up to my family in Sacramento, California, said, "Dad, I'm on my way to St. Louis. What are you going to do there?" I said, "I don't know." I got back to St. Louis and I checked in there, and sure enough, another replacement depot. And they said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." "Well, you can go to this, you can do this." So I waited for orders, and 3 months later they came up. I was helping take men to the chow hall, bring them back. I know my name came up with two others to go to AFASC flying cadets in Orlando, Florida. We rode all night in the bus, and we got off the bus, and there was a policeman standing at the corner there, and we said, "Oh, well, here we were, waiting to go," he said, "You're going to go to the fairgrounds." And we said, "What are we going to do at the fairgrounds?" Well, see, by this time we had become second lieutenants, and here we were all bustling there. So we got a cab, went to the fairground. They dropped us off, took us inside, and the sergeant said, "Go down to the third flock room on the left." And all we could see was this courtyard with a whole bunch of stalls. They were horse barns. Went down and opened the horse barn, and here were two cots. One was mine, and one of the other guys traveling with me. And here they had these wire things there to stay on. And the next morning we got up, and one of the corporals got us aside and said, "When you go downtown, sir, if you've got any money, buy some newspapers and line those cots." And that's how I was getting started in something. But we went that day to a big hall, about 300 people in there. And there's a colonel up there saying, "Yes, we're here for you, some very interesting business here for you young gentlemen. There's a career for you in the service someplace, and we're going to find it for you. You're in the Army Air Force School of Applied Tactics, and we're going to train you." Just then, out of the vestibule, came a gentleman with a kind of a blue uniform with a great big flowing mustache, he came up and he took the mic away from his colonel, and we all were looking at him. He said, "I'm Wing Commander Donaldson, RAF. Have you ever heard of radar?" None of us had heard of radar in our lives. And this is what the British had been saved, part of it, they saved the Battle of Britain, if you go back in history, is because of this. Well, you gentlemen are going to become controllers. These pilots don't know where they're going and where they've been or why they were there, and you're going to be a part of the mass. So we started in the class, and I ended up with the school of things. A lot of you have seen back in history or even grew up around it. They were in a big room, and they had headsets on, moving people around, and this is what we did. I did that for 3 months, and then myself and another chap were selected to go out into the boonies of Florida, and we had a radar station. We walked in, and here was the antennas going around, the little head in the tent, and here was the radar scope. And our job then, we were going to be taught, put our headsets on, watch these blips, and show these men where to go and what to do. Well, we spent some 2.5 months there in Orlando, Florida, doing that. And the next thing you know, 4/14th and 4/15th were sent over going overseas. Nobody in town knew it except the women. All the women knew we were being shipped out. So sure enough, the next day we were always secretly getting on the train, and we looked out, and here was mothers and fathers and their women, their daughters and everything, all waving goodbye to us. Now, how old was I? I was just going 21 years of age. So we went up to Camp Kilman, New Jersey. Sure enough, we ended up there, and we went aboard a ship, and as Augie had mentioned, I guess, and the 414th gentleman said, we were on this ship, and there were 6 or 8 men in a room, and the lieutenants, so here I was a second lieutenant, and then the other pilots were only a couple of them were lieutenants, first lieutenants. But we went aboard, and almost off the ship, off the coast of Ireland and England, we lost our rudder, and we almost, the piano in the mess hall came across the mess hall and took a couple of guys down. One fellow lost an ear, somebody else lost him, but here we were in combat before we even got to shore. Well, there's a very short story about going ashore. We're going down this gangplank, and of course it was dark, and there were no lights on it, and pretty soon someone shouted out, "Where is your commander?" And somebody in the back said, "Oh, that jerk is behind us." And this was, behind it was Augie Augsburger, our lieutenant, who was here. They were expecting a man come ashore who was at least a colonel or a brigadier general in charge of all this. So we worked away, and the pilots went to hit the airport, Air Force Base, and that's as a possible controller. Myself and another Tom Crowder were going out to a little place, and we went off to a radar, and they didn't have a place for us to stay in this little village, so we lived at the hotel. And here we were as second lieutenants, and they gave each one of us a bicycle, and we rode a bicycle to the radar site in the daytime, and we started being controllers of not only our own 15 people or 414, whatever. We didn't know the squadrons they were in, but a lot of the RAF, we were going operational training with the war going on. And this was quite something to get on your bicycle, work all night behind the scope, and then drive through the town, and all the natives waving at you because they knew we're the only 2 Americans in the whole town. So it was quite interesting. Then we regrouped with the night fighters up in Scotland, and we got some training there, and I went to a radar station there, and to another controller, but our pilots, we were with them every night, and we'd go in, and when we were running practice interceptions, and these guys would come and say, who were you on the scope last night? And I'd say, yes, I was on. What were you on? What was your call sign? Tell me. So, well, you led me, almost led me. I said, wait a minute. When we tell you to go starboard from 060 to 050, we want you to pull your finger out and start the airplane turning. Don't go sit there because you're going to miss intersection. And they'd laugh at us, but this was the history of starting to be a young man, 21 years old, responsible for these men flying this airplane. Well, off we went, as I say, we were there, and then we were headed for we went headed for Africa, and we all got into Africa. And one of the interesting things you people might interested in, two of our favorite companions, other than the pilots and the ROs, we found two boxer puppies in Morocco, and we hauled them all over to Tanig, a crossing, and we had two mascots. So, sure enough, the mascots, we used to try to sneak them aboard with the pilots, and the pilots said, you can't bring them aboard. Well, this went on and on. Eventually, the invasion into Corsica, and I went aboard. I thought, well, being just a GCI controller out the stage as radar station. This wasn't the truth. The next thing I know, I was aboard a British boat going into to do combat and invasion. And what happened is bad weather set in. Also, the Navy came in, and the poor Navy guys took off from their aircraft, had an aircraft carrier there, and the Huns did a pretty good job. It was pretty rough. They shot down quite a few of our Navy boys, but our fellows, 415, 414, hadn't been in yet, gotten in there yet. They were in a day or two later. But it was very interesting. My first 3 days ashore was pulling dead bodies out of the water. And I figured, is this for the guy 21 years old, almost 22, has to learn? But this is my start of my career as being ground intercept officer. And I was made a member of the squadron. We were on their TONE, and this is what the British told them to do, because our people had not been akin to what a GCI controller did. So I kicked around there, but when the squadron moved, I would move with them. If I got to move, as if I went over to Italy, we went into southern Italian invasion, I ended up in a British radar station. Then maybe that squadron would move again, I would be up with another. So I pigtailed along until we got all the way up and to Scotland, and then we trained there, and that's where the 415 to 414, but they left for Africa, and we tailed along, and GCI controllers became crew members, and I don't know, down to C-40 something. But there's how we got picked up these puppies. But my whole career was with these men. As we went forward, they went forward, we went forward. And as I said, when we got together, about every month or so, every 3 months, I would leave one of these radar sites and go back to the squadron. Well, the first place you went, you find out where the mess hall is and where the tent for the bar is, and that's where we'd end up. And that night we'd start, and that's when these guys would start saying, you didn't do this. If you'd have done this, I'd have shot somebody down. And we'd turn back and say, if you would, and I won't use the words, to do what we told you, you would have a better life in your aircraft. But the whole thing was just a family. We were family. And people say, why are you so proud of the fact that you're here now, today, Mid-Atlantic Air Museum with these men? You weren't a pilot. Matter of fact, I used to when I picked up a screwdriver at home, my wife would pick up the phone and call the career man, because I knew nothing about engines and nothing about anything, but I did know something about GCI, about controllers. But this was a career that, here I was, a young fella heading to be a lawyer, and here I was stumbling around the world, directing men my same age, and it was their lives in it. and we won't report this on air, but one night one of them was coming back from a career out of the Mediterranean on patrol, and he said, "Hello, radar, this is Millwheel 55. I would like home base, which was the airport." So I went back in the air as being a very intelligent Irishman and said, "Roger, Millwheel, switch the channel J for Jesus and jump." And I thought that was great. And everybody in the ops room, the tent, they all laughing. Well, 2 months later, through everybody started an investigation we didn't realize I should have been doing some like communication. The whole Mediterranean was lined with listening devices. Ours was listening for the enemy and our own people and also the enemy. But they had taped all this. So they tracked it down that I was the one that did this. So I had to have some OSI people came out and interviewed me, and I had convinced them I had no reason to cause those men to get in trouble. I was bringing them home. I had them under control. But this is how teamwork started in this night fighting business. Why am I here today? Because I learned some teamwork of living with men doing the same thing. And one of the reasons that we're here today, because Rich will tell you more and more and more, is we want to realize that once we go away to our graves and God calls us, we want somebody, a young boy in high school or a man, somebody in junior college, to come out and be able to go through these things and pick out this stuff and listen that there were people just like them, were people that were night fighters. This is what a lot of people didn't realize. It was a small effort of World War II with 3 people sitting here in this audience, regardless of whether they were mechanics or pilots or what they were, and we're proud of and want the fact that someone someday will be able to bite into it and say, "Hey, there were some wonderful guys." Thank you very much. I forgot to tell you, I started to be a lawyer, but I didn't get there.